Hey everyone, John Michael here. Get ready for another fantastic trip through time with Michelle and I as we explore Fort Worth's log cabin village and discuss the importance of water to Texas pioneers of the late 1800s. I said this last time, but my voice is messed up. My throat hurts very bad. That's why I sound weird. And I still sound weird because I recorded both these intros at the same time. So really no time has passed for me, even though 2 weeks have passed for you. In part one, we talked with Shae Adams, the Assistant Historic Site Supervisor here at the Log Cabin Village. This time, Shae shows us around the village where we learn about historic candle making, blacksmithing, weaving, and smuggling during the Civil War. On a side note, if you're into ASMR, specifically blacksmith sound-based ASMR, then you're in luck. Our blacksmith sounds are so clear and crisp that it sounds like you're right in the forge with us and Larry. Thanks very much to Shae Adams, Chuck, the textiles guy, Larry, the blacksmith, and Kevin, the doctoral student, for talking with us about water and history. Now let's get to the episode.
All right, and just like the Frontier, this is a choose-your-own-adventure site. So if you go to the left, you go to our Tompkins cabin, where people get to dip their own candles, which is always exciting and fun. That's also where you will find Matilda and her layers of dresses. Straight ahead of us here is the blacksmith shop, and today we have Larry smithing up there for us. And to the right, we have our Pickard cabin, where we talk about spinning and weaving. Okay. So... whichever way you guys like to go. Candles. All right. We'll come spy on the candle people.
So there's a school group here right now, right?
Yeah, there's these are kindergartners.
Oh, cool.
So oh my gosh, the candle pot is almost bigger than they are. This makes my heart happy. So they should be wrapping up here pretty soon. And so at your other cabins, you should have it probably free to yourself on a day like today.
So let's see, we have kind of a small log cabin house, some sort of kind of covering and shed. Is that a good job? No, horrible.
And here we have so Teresa, one of our historical interpreters, is with a group of kindergartners right now, and she is showing them the delicate process of dipping a candle. And this group has actually purchased candles, and so these kids are going to dip a candle into the hot wax, and then they're going to pull it back up, and especially on a cold day like today, it's going to dry really fast. And then they'll get to take those candles home with them to say, look what I did at the village today. And hopefully they won't drop their candles into the candle pot.
Where did they get all the wax?
Where did pioneers get the wax? So there's different kinds. So you would have used, we use the paraffin wax. So eventually paraffin wax became an option, but beeswax was also an option, but beeswax is expensive and hard to get. So what a lot of people would do is render the fat, and you would have tallow. So tallow candles are from animal fat. And so that's really going to go along with using what you have and using it to its fullest extent. So this would have been probably candle making season around this time of year. You don't want to make candles in the summer because it's going to take forever because the wax is going to keep dripping off rather than drying. So the candles that we make here, a good candle of a good width is probably going to take about 50 to 60 dips.
Wow.
And so one of the things some of our ancestors would do is they would make this a time to party. And so you just gather up your friends and we're just going to do candle dipping. Kind of like a barn raising, but for candles. Hey, guys.
Hi.
We are recording a podcast. So what's that? It's like a story that you can listen to on your radio or on your phone.
It is weird.
Yeah. So, and also, we can also keep walking. You guys can come back.
Yeah. We just come back.
Bye, guys. Enjoy your candles.
Oh, that's crowded too.
Whoop,
Whoops.
sorry. See, this is why we're getting new pathways.
Oh, yeah, you guys are going to be closed down.
Yeah,
Right?
we will be closed December 19th through early March.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
It is a long time. However, you can still catch us at our local community centers.
Okay.
We're going to be doing some joint events with them, especially at Thomas Place and Fire Station. So come see us.
Cool deal.
Let's check in here. Yeah. If you guys want to come in here?
Yeah, let's let
Chuck has some really cool stuff.
give the mic to.
Wider than this. Would you like? It should be a little warmer than. Why am I on a microphone?
We're doing a podcast. They're doing a podcast. I'm
We're
just
doing a podcast.
taking them around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ask you questions and we can hear you better.
Okay. This is the Pickard cabin. This is William and Ellen. Her first name was Melissa, but on her tombstone is a big Ellen on the front, so I don't think she liked Melissa a whole lot. Originally, they came from Tennessee. William with his, I think it was 4 brothers and 1 sister, about 1853. Moved, and I'm not sure exactly where the cabin is, where their farm was. I believe it was east of here, towards Dallas County. I don't know necessarily if it was Dallas or Tarrant or which side it was. Him and his wife lived there for a number of years until 1861 or thereabouts, when my understanding is that he joined the Confederate Army, was in the Army for 2 years, came back in 63, and decided he needed to get out on his own. So he took his wife, his 3 children, and bought this, which was originally built out in Parker County. This is the original cabin. Not the floor, not the ceilings, but the walls themselves. And if you look at the walls, there's little cut marks in there. And that comes from the fact that someone was swinging an adze or an axe and cut this by hand. In the South, they tended to square off logs. So those logs are between 165 and 170 years old. And they're still into chinking. There's a myriad of recipes for chinking. What you do is that you fill in the space with scrap wood or whatever else, and then you daub it with mud, straw, like adobe, but you could add horsehair, you could add corn husks, whatever you got, as available. This stuff is more like mortar, and my understanding it may be replaced, but I don't know that for a fact. So, the new stuff is actually kind of soft and spongy, so it allows the wood to expand and contract, and also repels insects, which is even better. And this is all white oak or live oak. So, we have this set up for textiles to show what people did in a time when there's no ready to wear. There's no stores that you can go out and buy things that are already made. I mean, even if you lived in the East, you're going to have to order a dress. You would have a dressmaker or seamstress or somebody else make it up for you. And you'd have to buy the bolt of cloth or whatever you picked out, whatever. Here, if you want anything, it's going to have to come all the way across from the East by whatever trains there were in the 1850s. And they're building track, but they're not building all the track, and there's really no railroad bridges across the Mississippi. As a matter of fact, there's no bridges across the Mississippi until 1858, which actually crosses in St. Louis, I believe. So anything has to be brought in by ferry or by steamboat or brought up to New Orleans and then put on a flatboat and then brought up as far as the rivers will go, and not all rivers in Texas are navigable. So at some point it may, you may run out of water, maybe too low, and so you're gonna have to take it off of a wagon, or take it off, put it on a wagon, hauled by a team over dirt roads, and brought it to your store. So if you see it inside of 6 months, or 6 months, 2 months, good luck. So this isn't the Amazon, and there's no free shipping. Okay.
So another way that water was really important, because you have your trade is going to come. Your trade is going to come by the rivers, like from New Orleans and up the Brazos. Mr. Foster from our last cabin definitely made use of those, and we have invoices of things that he would order from Mississippi that would come down the Mississippi, and then they would come over and go up the Brazos. And so he built his house very close to the Brazos River because he would have loved Amazon Prime.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Transportation's a big deal. Everybody's on horseback here, or on wagons, or on foot. So, and that's basically it until the railroads come in. And there's no railroads. Well, there's about 120 miles of railroad, but it's way south towards Galveston. They're in the process of building it, but the Civil War stopped that. There wouldn't be any more railroads built in Texas till after the war. A railroad actually hits Dallas in 1875 and doesn't hit Fort Worth until 1876. So we're talking 20 years later on. Then we'll see a train come in. In the 1850s, they actually discovered aniline dyes, but that's in Europe, and that ain't anywhere near here. So what you have, if I'm leaning over, you can see a lot of natural stuff. You use blueberries and vinegar, or onion skins and vinegar, more vinegar, alum. These all tend to come out brownish. You can actually add some other things to make it a little more reddish, but you don't have a whole lot of variety. Blue is actually a very hard color to get in natural dyes. But anyway, now you've got this. You can spin it in wool, in a case of wool, and I don't do this real well. So I don't want to embarrass myself. My wife does this, and she promised to teach me, but I've had promises before. But anyway, and what you do is that you spin it on the spinning wheel. It's a little treadle, and just like when the old-fashioned sewing machines, you spin the wheel and you'll spin thread on here. Now you've got wool thread. If you do it in opposite directions, you have wool yarn that you can knit directly. So you can take the thread, if it's dyed whatever it is, to this. This is a little tabletop loom. I won't say every family had one. A loom is something farmers at this time, just like now, but more so then, they're always looking for a way to develop and not necessarily diversify, but another way to make money or make ends meet to bring in cash money. Most farmers don't have any cash money until in the fall or this time of year when they actually sell their crop. Then they can actually start to buy things and whatnot. Because they actually have some money. But during the summer and whatnot, if you raise horses, you can sell a horse, you can sell a pig, you can sell whatever you're going to do, or trade or whatever. One way is that and I don't want to be sexist, but the wife or whoever's in charge of the house or in charge of this thing could actually weave cloth for her own family or for sale. There's larger looms, and I understand we own one. This shirt apparently was recovered from someplace and was actually made on one of the larger looms that the Log Cabin Village owns.
Oh, cool.
And now this goes back, I understand, sometime maybe the 70s or even early 80s. That's why it's a little chewed up. But it's something that can actually be made. And when I showed this one back in September when it was still 95 degrees, most people didn't want to touch it. Now it'd be useful today.
Right.
So anyway, cool. There's any way that you can do to generate income, because you want your family to survive and thrive and go out and whatnot, and when the kids get old enough and figure it out, you push them out the door and repaint the room and all that stuff. So.
Oh, there you are. I think we're gonna head to the blacksmith area.
Hey,
Hi.
how are you?
Doing good.
We have some.
You're wired for sound today.
Yeah, we have some special guests here from the water department. They're doing a water podcast and.
A water podcast.
Yeah, to come and learn about how our ancestors used water on the frontier. And so this is John Michael and this is Michelle. This is Larry.
Johnny.
And Johnny. I'm so sorry, Johnny.
That's okay. No, it's fine.
You're hidden so deep inside that hood. I see it in there. Okay. So what can I tell you? What are you interested
Well,
in?
how was water used in blacksmithing during that time period?
Blacksmiths would have used the water for quenching the metal. So after it would have gotten heated up so you could do the shaping and the forging, then you needed to quench it so that it'd be strong again. So that would have been one of the uses for the water in the blacksmith shop.
Would this have been fresh water that they got out of a spring? Would this have been used bath water? Where, or be, was there, I don't know. I'm just, where?
I'm not certain that it would have made much difference as to whether the water would have been fresh water or whether it would have been water that had been recycled and used again. I know that there were some instances where you might have used things like oil to quench the metal as well, but that would have been used in case you were making tools. If you're making tools, you wanted it to cool off a little more evenly, a little more slowly. Oil would have cooled it off a little more evenly, a little more smoothly, slowly than water would have.
So what were you making when we walked up?
Okay, I was working on making some little miniature horseshoes, using a lot of the same tools and a lot of the same techniques you would use for full-size shoes. I'd shape the metal around the horn of the anvil, and then you would forge that into the shape. You would punch little holes that you would drive the nails through that would keep that shoe on. Okay.
Kit, would it be okay if I come in there and get some of the hammering sounds? We're city employees. I don't know if we mentioned.
Yeah, I think
we're
that
with
should make it legal, shouldn't it?
Yeah,
Sure.
we're.
I don't have my ID on me, but I can tell you what it is. 60, 29, 60. You need extra pair of hands, or are you good?
Yeah, let's both go.
Okay.
And then just I don't know which microphone is which now.
Yeah, we'll stay
Yeah.
out here, Johnny.
Yeah, so there's a couple of sounds. We
Stop, drop, and roll, everybody. In case catch on fire, right?
can show you, give you some of the
Ugh.
sound of making
Yeah.
the
Woo.
doors working here.
Wow.
Here's working on some of the metal we were talking about. See the shape starting to form there now in that horseshoe. Now, if I wanted to start a new piece of metal, let's say I wanted to flatten out this piece right here, then I need to hit a little harder over a different part of the anvil, but still using some of the same technique. So again, get the fire going. As I turn the crank, that blows the air, blows the oxygen into the fire. That's what brings the temperature of the fire up. And then when I put the metal on there, and that's where I can get it heated up going on 1800 degrees. It becomes soft enough where I can start to shape it. I'll show you how I'll do that now the next step. This is a good warm place to be on a cold day like today.
Yeah, no kidding.
So now that metal's just about ready to go. And you could just take step right back here. So that'll be my next horseshoe there that I'll be working on. Working again over the horn of the anvil. Okay. Very cool. Now, one last sound for you here. If got the piece of metal heated up and I want it to be cooled off, and I need to quench it, you just put the microphone over by the water there.
Nice.
That'll give you that sound. Then, of course, for tools, when you make axes or hatchets, anything that needed to be sharpened, you'd use a grindstone like this tool over here. Sit down at the grindstone, put the blade or the hatchet
Nice and sharp.
That's it. We're ready to cut down logs for your next log cabin.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
Okay, so if we go up the hill from the blacksmith, we can get to our Shaw grist mill. Now this building was actually never a mill when it was in use, but we've converted it into a mill. All of the milling equipment in it is from the 19th century, but the mill itself the wheel was added here. Which disappointment of disappointments for you guys. I'm so sorry. We have the mill off today because of the weather.
Yeah, we picked the coldest day of the year to come.
Oh, man. I mean, you would never known from like Sunday.
Yeah, I know.
That it would be like this today.
Cool.
Yeah, so you can see a little bit of ice hanging down.
Yeah, no kidding.
So this would be an overshot mill because you can see the water would come down that pipe up at the top and then turn the wheel this way instead of what I think we usually think of with a mill wheel being in a river.
Yeah.
Or like in a canal. So this would have been used, especially if you were near like a hill or where you had water coming down.
Okay.
It would have been a lot easier and a pretty efficient way of making use of that water power.
Yeah, and they're using this to grind corn and flour.
Corn, wheat, any kind of grain. So you can do quite a bit of grinding. So there's all of our milling equipment. Makes quite the noise when they get it all turned on and everything. Yeah, because you can see the millstones in there.
Yeah.
It's the friction of those that's going to create your wheat or your cornmeal or whatever it is that you're making. So you'd put your grain in that hopper and it would go down, and it's the power of the mill, of the wheel outside with the water turning it, that's going to turn all of the equipment in here.
And we passed through the herb garden to get here.
Absolutely.
What kind of herbs did they were common back then?
They would have grown all kinds of things. Just like we like to use herbs for our cooking, so did they. Out here, our herb garden is taken care of by the Fort Worth Herb Society.
Oh.
So they do a lot of great work. They come out and they are volunteers. And so they grow us all kinds of great stuff. I know we have some rosemary out there and some curry. I believe they had some dill out there earlier this year. Some mint. Mint would have been a popular one.
Did you know about the Herb Society, Michelle?
I think I did, actually. Yeah, I think I was familiar.
Yeah. And you never told me?
Didn't know you were an herb fan.
I'm going to say, are you an herb head?
I had my own little garden for a while.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. If you come out to our events, sometimes I know they were here for our fall festival.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, they come out and they do great work. So we're thankful because neither Rena nor I have green thumbs. So it looks much better than it would if it was the two of us taking care of it.
Yeah, it looks awesome. Do they use these herbs in the cooking classes that you guys do here sometimes?
I don't believe so. I don't think that Jeannie's going to use any of them.
Oh, okay.
They could. The herbs will show up in our break room when the Herb Society's been here. Like, oh, hey, anybody want some sage? Yes, please. So it's all very fresh, very nice.
Oh, I think I smell the candle wax.
Oh, yeah. It has
that's nice.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of a scavenger hunt I'd like to create for people. I'm like, go around and find these smells of the village. So yeah, the candles have a very distinct but really nice smell to them.
Mm-hmm. What time does it close down?
So Tuesday through Friday, we are open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And on the weekends, we close at 5. So we're open 1 to 5 on Saturdays and Sundays. Gotcha. Okay, well, she's not here, but I know how to do this.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool.
Hey, Johnny, do you want to do it? He was begging earlier. Yeah. Pull back your sleeves. It's Mom and Heart over here.
Watch your sleeves. Do it.
Here, let me help you out. We don't want
I wish
wax on your coat.
I wish you guys could see this, because I'm pretty sure earlier she licked her thumb and like wiped something off his face.
Yeah, that's normal.
That's a mom thing, right?
Yeah.
Alright, so you're going to have your candles on some kind of block like this. And you're going to dip it into the hot wax. So you just dip down and then pull it right back up. Drip, drip. And on a cold day like today, it's done dripping.
cool. They look like chocolate-covered bananas.
Yeah.
Right here. Okay. Make sure you don't drop it. You're going to come over here. All right. You're just going to dip it down into the wax and then pull it up. Drip, drip. There you go. Nicely done.
Good
and then
job.
You can put it back on the rack.
That's the best candle dipping I've ever seen.
That's beautiful.
Johnny's got a new job.
You just got to do it 60 more times, like she said, and then you'll have a candle.
So the coloring on this, I mean, is this brown? I guess I always see candles and I always think white. So is this more period accurate? This kind of, we were noticing they kind of look like chocolate covered bananas.
Right now we have our chocolate candles.
Oh, okay.
And part of that is because unlike our pioneer ancestors, we have our candle pot all year round.
Okay.
And so when we have it open on days like today, like dirt and leaves and things.
So that's
will
just
fall
a
in.
natural coloring
Yeah,
just from the environment.
absolutely. So
Okay.
usually they look about this color, this
Okay.
kind of caramel, nice color. Just lately we've been getting our chocolate candles. So part of what that means is really just we need to clean out the candle pot, and that's just quite an exercise in patience.
I can imagine.
So you could have gotten different colors of candles. You could have white candles. Usually those are going to be like beeswax candles.
Okay.
They're more expensive. So again, Mr. Foster probably would have had beeswax candles because he wouldn't have dipped them. He would have bought them. But
Mr.
with
Fancy Pants.
I know, Mr. Fancy Pants, Amazon Prime over here. You do want to talk to our interpreter, who's really cool. He's his name is Kevin, and he is getting his dissertation right now.
Oh, okay.
And he, like, waterways factor really highly into his dissertation. And one of the things he was telling us last week was he's been looking at a lot of smuggling routes and how people use the rivers, especially during the Civil War, to smuggle goods. So, Kevin?
Hi there.
Kevin,
Hi.
this is John Michael and Michelle.
Hi,
and
Michelle.
Johnny.
Nice to
Sorry,
meet you.
I
Oh, sorry. It's
mentioned my
okay.
hand.
It's okay. And Johnny.
Hi there.
Big gentle.
All right, if we go to the next cabin down,
Okay.
we can go to the Sela, and there's a nice warm stove in there.
Oh, great.
This is our hands-on cabin, so you can touch everything in here.
Fun.
Except for Kevin.
Okay.
All right, so I guess she told you we were from the water department, right?
Right.
Yeah, so we want to talk about all the ways that water affected people in the time period and, that sort of thing.
Sure. Well, how long you got?
Oh, I have to pick up my mom from the airport, so I have to leave at 3. If you want a real answer.
Right. Well, when we talk about water in the past, just in general, of course, the very first thing we have to remember is that before the train and the plane, if you wanted to travel, you moved by water. If you wanted to travel quickly, you definitely moved by water. So water is the main facilitator of communication and trade and culture throughout pretty much the entirety of our history. And even more than that, if you look at settlement patterns, not just here in the New World, but in the Old World, you will find that they begin by the sea, by water. So, it's almost impossible to understate the importance of water in U.S. history. My specialty actually looks at sailors along the Gulf Coast and in the Caribbean. So it's something that I'm, moderately familiar with.
Yeah.
But time and time again, we see that without this access to this sort of maritime trade network, the entirety of the U.S. economy would fall apart.
Can we go back and introduce you? What's your name?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Kevin Grubbs. I work here at the Fort Worth Log Cabin Village.
Yeah. And Shae mentioned you're getting your doctorate.
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. What in?
History.
Yeah.
Where I specialize in U.S. history with a Latin American subfocus.
Okay.
So the United States and its relationship with the rest of the Western Hemisphere, especially south of us.
Okay.
Most of which is done by water.
Yeah. You talk a little bit more about.
Well, Shae had mentioned to me earlier to talk about smuggling with y'all. This is one of the focuses
absolutely.
of my dissertation is on smuggling in the Caribbean and specifically in the Atlantic world in general. And not a lot of people are familiar with smuggling in the second half of the 19th century as a concept. We think about illegal acts on the water. We think about Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's cool. Don't get me wrong, but that's way earlier than most of United States history. That's colonial history. When we talk about crime in U.S. history, there are some pirates, Jean Lafitte and whatnot, but mostly we're talking about smuggling. Smuggling of human cargo in the case of enslaved Africans, and smuggling of more prosaic goods other than that. So the big notable conflict, of course, that the sort of characterizes the 19th century in popular culture is the Civil War. And very few people are aware of the extent of smuggling in that conflict. We're vaguely aware that it happened. Famously, Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind was a blockade runner. He was a smuggler. He ran the Union blockade on his steamboat to get supplies for the Confederacy. That was his job, right? Well, here in Texas, there is a vastly unexplored segment or section of that history, because not a lot of people are aware that a lot of the goods smuggled into the South, especially the South that was west of the Mississippi River, came through Texas. Through a variety of paths. Some came through Galveston and then traveled up the rivers of Texas. Some actually went to Matamoros in Mexico and then came over the border from the southwest. But most of the time they were using, in fact, all the time, they were using the rivers of Texas, because if you wanted to get anywhere quickly, you had to go by water. So a lot of the smuggled clothes, smuggled weaponry, and more prosaic items like smuggled coffee is always one that I love to see. All that stuff that came from Great Britain or France or whatever, it would come through Texas.
Yeah. So it's been a long time since I read a book about the Civil War.
Sure.
But I seem to recall, wasn't Great Britain and weren't they on the Confederate side, sort of on the lowdown?
In a very down low, quiet sort of way.
So that's where
that was a never an official position, right?
Right.
There were segments of Great Britain that relied heavily on Southern cotton.
Yeah.
That was the whole set. That was the Confederacy's idea, was King Cotton. If we stop selling our cotton to Great Britain, they'll have to help us, which turned out to be not true.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of people in Great Britain specifically, and in Europe more generally, that wanted to see the Confederacy succeed. Not necessarily because they agreed with their ideals, but primarily because they wanted to see democracy fail. We have to remember that these are mostly monarchies that we're talking about. This whole democratic experiment, they weren't really on board with that.
It was less than 100 years old at that point,
right,
so
absolutely.
they still wanted to,
Sort
of almost in living memory of the people who...
Just about. I mean, 70 years.
Yeah, right.
Abraham Lincoln said. And in fact, talking about water, the ships that the Confederacy built, because they didn't start with a navy, those were almost all built in Great Britain and then smuggled, if you want to call it that way, down to the Caribbean, where they were then put into service in the Confederacy.
And each side had a submarine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I thinking of the ironclad
You might be thinking
ships?
of the ironclads.
The ironclads.
There were submarines, but
right.
they played
Okay.
a tiny, minuscule role in the war.
Each side had one ironclad ship, right?
At first.
Yeah. Okay.
Many, many more were built.
Okay.
But you're thinking of the Monitor and the Merrimack,
Yeah.
which actually ought to be called the Monitor and the Virginia, but that's neither here nor there.
We don't want to get into that
historical
controversy.
pet peeve of mine. But they did ironclads. This was the first war where that really came into its own.
Yeah.
But it is sort of trailing military advances in Europe, but more importantly, transportation advancements more generally.
Yeah.
Steamships had been in use for some decades before anyone thought, hey, why don't we slap some metal on these?
Yeah. Well, because when I think about the Civil War, I don't think about the navies that were involved. How important was naval warfare in the Civil War?
Well, in the immediate military sense, that depends on who you ask. So I always say that they were pretty important, not least because the blockade of the South was part of what made the Confederacy's economic situation so desperate.
Cutting off their ports from people trying to... Okay.
The wealth of the South was in cotton. That cotton was being sold abroad. And the way to sell anything abroad was by sea. Now, the exact efficacy of the North's blockade is questionable. Part of the research that I've done shows that the South was sending these blockade runners, these small, fast steamships, again and again and again and again, and they're getting by. So, There's definitely people that are getting past the blockade, but the big ships, the sort of backbone of the economy, couldn't. So that definitely had an impact. More generally, the Confederate sort of privateers, they're not privateers, they were part of the Confederate Navy, but you might think of them as, sea hunters, sea wolves. They wreaked havoc on Union civilian ships. The Union did not have a blockade. They were still sending ships to Great Britain and France and wherever. Mm-hmm. And the Confederacy's vessels, most notably the CSS Alabama, they did such damage to the United States' merchant marine that some historians have said that it destroyed the United States' economic power at sea. To such an extent that the United States would not carry its own exports to any high percentage until after World War I.
Oh, wow. Okay. My mind went blank. Do you have any questions about the Civil War?
No.
What
do you talk about when you're in here? Like this, tell us a little bit about this room and what you normally discuss with the public when you're in here.
Well, this is the Sela cabin. It is our hands-on cabin. So this here, unlike most of our rooms, this is a completely open zone. And I really like being in this room because, especially with the younger kids, they get to see all this cool stuff. They don't know what it does. Here they get a chance to inspect it. So when people are in here, I'll usually introduce them to the cabin, give them a brief idea of what it's for, and invite them to go on and explore. There's a few things I always like to point out to them. The rope bed is always a good one to show them because people don't think about that.
Oh, wow.
There were no box springs back on the frontier. So if you wanted to sleep in your bed, you would tie, like you see here, a crisscross of ropes across it. And that was your box springs. So people are always blown away by that. They hadn't thought about, what are you going to do?
What is this?
So that's your vacuum cleaner. That's a rug beater. So for one of our experiences here, if you do our Wagons West tour, we take kids out and we have them beat a rug to say, yeah, there's your vacuum cleaner. So yeah, I was about to say, I know we're getting close on you guys' time.
Yeah, we're getting close to taking my mom to the airport time.
Is there anything else that you'd like?
Yeah.
You think would be valuable to include, or we're kind of limited by our limited.
Yeah, I can't think of any smart questions. I just want
to. You mentioned the cattle drives to them. Actually, talked about peeing downstream.
I didn't get to that.
So here in Fort Worth, famous for the cattle, right? When the cowboys would bring the cattle drives up to Fort Worth, they would have to wait if the Trinity River was high, for it to go down before they could take their cattle across the river and take it into Fort Worth proper. So it was very important that you paid attention to where the herds were and which direction the water was flowing before you went and got some water out of the Trinity River, because there was a lot of cows nearby doing their business.
It'll float on into your cooking pot.
That's right. There you go. Builds character.
Do you have a favorite Civil War movie?
Django Unchained, does that count?
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I watched Glory the other day, and I don't think it holds up very well. I don't like Matthew Broderick.
When I was really young and
Let me just put a little caveat. I think everyone else is great. I just don't like Matthew Broderick. He's a little short. I think, as a short person, I can say this. He's a little short to be a colonel, and he looks like he's wearing his dad's Civil War uniform, like at dress-up day. That's all. That's my only complaint.
That's fair enough.
Matthew Broderick. Also, as a short person, he doesn't represent us great.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any books on this time period that you'd recommend?
Yeah. For the non-historic, last time we had this time period was in high school, probably, right?
Don't point at me. I read history books all the time. You heard me bringing up the ironclads.
Yeah.
I
knew that there were two ironclads.
So defensive. But yeah,
Okay.
what would be like a everyday person's good guide to this time period?
I'm saying you speak for yourself, Michelle.
Well, I'm talking about the public that probably listens to this. Okay, sorry.
But you were looking at me and touching me on the shoulder when you said it.
Are you talking about frontier or just 19th century?
Oh, just
Sorry,
Just
we're like,
anytime.
we're the historians here.
Yeah, like, ooh. What do the normal people read?
Yeah, what do they
Yeah.
both? Let's do both.
A fun
But,
Civil War
but
book.
let's be honest. I'm talking about like pop culture history. I'm not talking about like
Oh yeah.
dissertations. I don't want to read.
Okay, a good one.
I don't want to read that.
That was really got me into the Civil War is Confederates in the Attic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know, I was crushed. I've been really devastated. Like, I feel like I need to go light a candle for him. Yeah. So, yeah, the book that really got me interested in the Civil War and how we remember it is Confederates in the Attic by Tony Horwitz. It's a terrific book. Anything by Tony Horwitz really is great, but that one specifically deals with our time period. So that one's good. Also, Assassination Vacation by
That is a
Sarah
good one,
Vowell.
actually.
Oh, that one's really good. And
her wordy shipmates
right now, Yeah, on the Puritans.
yeah, I don't know. I wasn't as taken with wordy shipmates. It got a little wordy.
I'm a big fan of the Crucible movie. I watched it.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah.
I have a soapbox specifically for the Crucible that is not appropriate for your podcast. But
Like, do you have the same kind of problems with the Crucible that I have with Glory?
no, I actually really like the
Okay,
Crucible.
okay.
But it has about as much to do with Puritan history as I do with, I don't know, Sherpas.
Really?
At the end of the day, the Crucible is about, McCarthyism and communism more
say,
than
it's about the Red
anything
Scare.
about, yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple books. I'll send you a list of some more like kind of popular history ones because those are what I like to read in my off time too. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to throw one out more in my field, which is called Beyond Freedom's Reach. It's the story of a slave-owning family from New Orleans that fled to Cuba with their slaves rather than face the Union Army.
Thank you guys very much for doing this.
Absolutely.
For taking the time to show us around. And
Thank you.
all right.
Johnny's gonna sweep us out.
Yeah, I think so. He's ready to do some tours.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed our time travel episodes, and I hope you made it back safely to your own time. Just so you know, the Log Cabin Village site will be closed December 19th through early March 2020 to completely rebuild their walking paths. Check out their website, logcabinvillage.org, or their Facebook at Log Cabin Village for more details. Hope everyone has a great holiday season. Remember to give your friends and family the gift of H2OMG by taking their phones when they're busy cooking or unwrapping presents and subscribing them to our podcast. H2OMG is the gift that keeps on giving. Plus, it's free. See you next time.